The first time my HOA tried to raid my house at 5 in the morning, they came dressed like a bargain bin SWAT team and holding a fake gas leak notice printed off what looked like somebody's home printer. One of them kicked in my front door, another grabbed my arm, and all I could think standing there in a bathrobe in my own hallway was, well, this is a hell of a way to start a Tuesday. What they didn't know was that my son, an MMA fighter built like a truck with bad intentions, was sleeping 20 feet away. My name's Dan Harding. I'm 55, widowed, semi-retired, and I moved to this quiet corner of Nevada for one simple reason. I wanted peace. I've lived in the same one-story house for 12 years, nothing fancy, just a covered porch, decent internet, a backyard wide enough to catch the desert wind, and a view of the mountains that reminds you life doesn't always have to be loud. For a long time, it wasn't. The HOA existed, sure, but it mostly behaved like background noise. Newsletters, petty reminders, the occasional note about trash cans or weeds, the usual suburban theater. Then Karen Douglas got elected. Karen had that polished, aggressive energy some people mistake for leadership. Blonde bob, permanent yoga pants posture, like she was auditioning to rule a small country. She showed up talking about standards, security, integrity, neighborhood pride, all the words people use when they want control to sound noble. Within a week, she'd replaced the entrance sign with a huge banner that said something like Pride Security Standards, which was the kind of slogan that makes normal people immediately start checking where the exits are. My first violation notice showed up taped to my front door. Apparently, my floodlight was overly luminous and was disturbing the harmony of nighttime aesthetics. A few days later, I got another one saying my car was misaligned in the driveway front bumper 2 degrees off the recommended axis. I actually walked outside and stared at my sedan like maybe I'd missed some secret runway markings painted into the concrete. Then came the third notice, and that one stopped being funny. It accused me of suspicious late-night activity because an unidentified adult male had been entering the property after dark. That unidentified male was my son, Nick. Nick had moved back in while recovering from an injury, and if you saw him walking up the driveway at midnight, you might assume he was trouble. He's 28, professionally trained, shoulders like a freight crate, hands that look like they were assembled for solving arguments the hard way. But he's a good kid, calm by nature, disciplined, doesn't go looking for fights. Karen's people didn't care. They weren't interested in context. They were interested in building a case, or maybe building fear. Now, I work in IT, which means two things. I don't scare easy, and I read the fine print. I pulled out the HOA bylaws, went through them line by line, highlighted the relevant sections, and found exactly what I expected. There was no authority for random inspections, no emergency enforcement unit, no right to enter private property without proper board approval and due process. So I wrote Karen a formal letter, certified mail, calm tone, airtight language, the kind of response that says, I know exactly what you're doing and you picked the wrong man to try it on. A week later, someone slid a note under my door in the middle of the night. Next violation will result in internal inspection. No letterhead, no signature, no explanation. Just that. Bold, cold, stupid. Nick read it, looked at me and said, that's not an HOA anymore. That's a threat. He wasn't wrong. That same night, we walked the property, installed motion lights, upgraded the camera system, added sensors, cloud backup, local recording, the whole package. 2 nights later, a matte black SUV rolled past the house so slowly it felt personal. Tinted windows, silver lettering on the side that read HOA Enforcement Division. It looked official enough to fool anyone who wanted to be fooled, which is how a lot of fake power works. It doesn't need to be real, it just needs to look real long enough for people to obey. The next morning, 2 men showed up at my gate wearing black tactical polos with fake badges stitched onto the chest. They said they were there for a routine inspection tied to public safety concerns. I stepped outside with my phone recording and asked for paperwork. They handed me a laminated page with a logo, some nonsense about authorization from the president, and formatting so bad it looked like Microsoft Word had finally snapped and joined a militia. I told them they weren't licensed inspectors, they weren't code enforcement, and if they stepped onto my property, I'd have them arrested for trespassing. They hesitated, which told me everything. Then Ela Rivera called. Now there's your twist, because every neighborhood has one person. People underestimate until they start talking, and suddenly the room belongs to them. Isla lived 3 houses down, sharp as broken glass attorney, early 40s, the kind of woman who could make a smile feel like cross-examination. She told me Karen had quietly formed a shadow committee inside the HOA, something she was calling the Internal Integrity Wing, which sounds less like neighborhood administration and more like the final stage of a government nobody voted for. Worse, Ela had already checked. Karen's so-called enforcement people weren't registered with the state, not as security, not as inspectors, not as anything. That should have ended it. It didn't. A night later, Nick found a wireless earpiece half buried in the gravel by our side gate. That was the moment it stopped feeling petty and started feeling organized. At 5:07 the next morning, my front hallway exploded. There is no gentle way to describe the sound of your door getting hit from the outside before sunrise. It's not a knock, not a bang, not even really a crash. It's a violation. Wood-splitting, metal screaming boots pounding through a home that still smells like sleep and coffee and the life you thought was yours. I got out of bed in a bathrobe and hit the hallway just in time to catch 4 men in black tactical gear storming my house with flashlights in my face and one idiot shouting about a gas leak. Like that explained anything. One grabbed my arm. Another shoved a fake emergency authorization sheet at me. A third headed toward the back hall, yelling about basement access, which would have been funny if it weren't so insane because I don't even have a basement. Nevada soil and common sense usually take care of that. Before I could even process the stupidity of being invaded by fake officers looking for a fake basement, Nick's bedroom door flew open. He came out barefoot, shirtless, hair a mess, still half asleep, and somehow that made him look scarier. The first guy turned toward him and made the mistake people always make with men like my son. He thought size was the main thing to worry about. It isn't. Timing is. Nick moved fast, one clean kick to the gut that folded the man backward into the coat rack, then an elbow that dropped the second guy so hard he hit the floor like wet laundry. The third tried to rush him and got redirected straight into a shoulder lock with a pop loud enough to make me wince. The fourth one froze. Nick looked at him and said very calm, "Don't." That man listened. I called 911 and used exactly the words I wanted on record. Home invasion, forced entry impersonation, unauthorized personnel. While we waited for deputies, I stood there shaking in my robe, staring at 3 groaning men on my floor and one fake enforcer suddenly discovering religion in my foyer. Nick pulled on sweatpants like he was getting ready for a grocery run, not the aftermath of suburban insanity. When the sheriff's deputies arrived, the scene looked absurd enough that for a second, even they seemed unsure whether they were responding to a crime or walking into the weirdest community dispute in county history. The intruders claimed emergency authority. I pointed them to the security footage. 2 camera angles, full audio, clean timestamps, the door breach, the grab, the fake paperwork, everything. One deputy watched the screen, leaned back and said, "They didn't even knock." No, I told them they figured subtlety was for cowards. Then Karen showed up. She strode past police tape in a white Lexus with a clipboard tucked under one arm, like she was arriving at a ribbon cutting instead of a crime scene. Hair perfect, expression, tight voice clipped. She started talking about emergency clauses, safety mandates, infrastructure protocols, all of it fake, all of it delivered with the confidence of a woman who'd spent too long hearing herself speak without consequence. The deputy asked for supporting documents. She handed him a packet full of invented policy blurbs, made-up statute numbers, and enough fake authority to wallpaper a jail cell. Isla arrived a few minutes later and hit the ground like artillery. She handed over state licensing records, legal citations, registry printouts, the whole stack. Calm voice, no theatrics, just facts, landing one after another, like hammer blows. Karen's enforcement unit wasn't real. Her personnel weren't licensed. Her authority didn't exist. And now, with my broken front door hanging off the frame and 4 of her men moaning on the tile, her little empire had finally wandered into daylight. By lunch, I got a call from a restricted number warning me there would be consequences for assaulting designated HOA safety personnel. That's when the whole thing turned from outrageous to reckless. They weren't backing down. They were doubling down. So Nick fixed the door enough to close. Isla filed the complaints, and I did what people like Karen always forget quiet men know how to do. I followed the paperwork. That's where the real twist hit. The fake badges were the stupid part. The money was the dangerous part. With Isla digging through filings and me doing a little digital archaeology of my own, we found the trail. Karen had been siphoning HOA dues into an emergency preparedness fund that didn't exist before she took office. From there, the money moved into shell accounts tied to her brother and a fake security business with expired licensing and imaginary employees. Over 120 grand, maybe more, hidden behind line items with names bland enough to keep sleepy homeowners from asking questions. She hadn't just built herself a fake enforcement division, she'd made the neighborhood pay for it. That Monday she sued us in small claims court. I know. After a botched home invasion, forged documents, and a busted shoulder, this woman still thought the smart move was to drag us into court and claim Nick assaulted designated neighborhood officers in the performance of duty. You have to admire that kind of stupidity the way you admire a man who juggles gasoline near an open flame. Nick wore a suit that fit like it was trying not to insult him. I brought the evidence. Isla came armed with documentation and the expression of someone who'd been saving up this exact kind of day her whole life. Karen's lawyer tried to paint us as volatile. Then we played the footage. The room got real quiet. Then came the fake authorization sheets, the licensing records, the state registry results, the bank transfers, the shell companies, the money trail. Isla didn't raise her voice once. She just read numbers and dates in that cold, surgical tone lawyers use when they know truth is doing the heavy lifting. The judge listened, took off his glasses, and looked over at Karen's side of the room like a man trying to decide whether he was angry or embarrassed on behalf of civilization. He dismissed her case with prejudice on the spot and referred the matter for criminal review. After that, the neighborhood started talking. Emails came in from every direction. Fake inspections, bogus fines, intimidation, late-night knocks, threats over hedges, porch decor, wind chimes, Christmas lights. People had paid because they were scared or tired or busy, or because a uniform and a harsh tone is sometimes all it takes to make decent people question their own rights. That more than anything got under my skin. Not just what Karen did, but how easy it had been. How fast people accept power when it arrives wearing a badge, even a fake one. The sheriff's office raided the HOA office 3 days later. Nick and I watched from down the block while deputies hauled out file boxes, hard drives, laptops, and one very familiar-looking stack of tactical costumes. Karen stood on the sidewalk looking furious and pale at the same time, which is a hard combination to pull off. A few board members started resigning. One flipped. Another tried to claim ignorance, which is always adorable right before subpoenas start landing. Then came the arrest. No fireworks, no screaming, no dramatic speech, just 2 county officers walking Karen out in handcuffs. One gray morning, while half the neighborhood pretended not to watch through blinds, they were absolutely watching through. Fraud, unlawful entry forgery, conspiracy, misuse of HOA funds, witness, intimidation, impersonation-related charges. 18 counts in all by the time the dust settled. Her brother went down too. A couple board members took deals. One of the fake enforcers, the one who put hands on me in my hallway, got real prison time. And just like that, the terror of the cul-de-sac ended not with power, but with paperwork. That's the thing I learned from all this, maybe the ugliest truth in the whole story. Greed rarely shows up looking greedy. It shows up in a polo shirt with laminated documents and a smile asking for compliance. Real abuse almost never introduces itself as abuse. It calls itself order. It calls itself safety. It counts on decent people being too polite, too tired, or too unsure of the rules to push back. And the minute someone finally does, the whole rotten structure starts shaking because deep down it was never built on authority. It was built on bluff. 32 days after they kicked in my door, I installed a new one. Reinforced frame, smart lock, clean walnut stain, the kind of door that looks like it has boundaries and means it. The HOA got dissolved. A neutral management company took over, boring as oatmeal, exactly how neighborhood administration ought to be. No more patrols, no more fake inspectors, no more midnight power trips and tactical polos. A week later, Nick was cleared to return to training, and before he went back to the gym, he helped me throw a backyard barbecue. Just neighbors, burgers, cheap folding chairs, kids with sidewalk chalk laughter floating through a street that had finally unclenched. One guy handed me a 6-pack and thanked me for taking the hit for the rest of them. Ela stood by the grill laughing at my mailbox sign, which now reads in plain black letters, "This home is private property, not governed by fantasy." That night, after the last plate had been cleared and the patio lights were humming soft above the yard, Nick handed me a beer and looked around the porch. "You ever think about moving?" he asked. I took a sip, listened to the quiet, the real quiet this time, and said, "No." They already made their move. Turns out they kicked in the wrong damn door. So let me ask you this. When somebody uses rules, uniforms, and fear to control people, where's the line between enforcement and tyranny, and how far would you go before you pushed back? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was this justice karma or just overdue consequences? And have you ever dealt with someone who thought a little authority gave them the right to own everybody else's peace?